Right, click the link to join the channel here over at Subscribe. So these people seem to have some fundamental disconnect between, they have this worldview where they go, oh, we're owning the chads, we're making the dude bros so angry. They said that the lady for She-Hulk said that, which went one season because nobody watched it. And then she comes out and does an interview and says, we're owning the dude bros and we made them so angry. And if I'm the guy in charge of that division, I'd be like, you understand that we're trying to sell subscriptions here and you're kind of doing the opposite by making people angry enough to unsubscribe from Disney Plus or not to subscribe in the first place. You're really doing the opposite of what we need you to do by alienating the customers. That's a lot of these people. Where do they think the money comes from? It's like that South Park, the underwear elves, where there's a missing step, and the third step is profit. And you look at these SJWs, you go, so yeah, you're getting in fights on Twitter with customers, and it's like there's 50,000 people are reading those tweets, and you're insulting the customer and everyone who enjoyed the product for the stories for years. So everyone's reading that, and it's kind of making us look bad. Like, what's the color of the sky in your world where that results in profit? And they go, oh, we're beyond profit. It's like, well, the shareholders aren't beyond profit. They're very concerned about that. So Rings of Power, Mary Sue edition. And I know that word, they think that word is not used lightly because this is just as Mary Sue as a Mary Sue could be. Instead of Sauron making the ring, Galadriel makes the 3 elven rings. So correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't Sauron the antagonist who designs the rings for the elves, the dwarves, the men? He charms them, and he's got the one master ring to rule them all. The Hobbit starts the journey, fantastic book, and introduces Gollum and the ring in the caves under the mountain. It helps Frodo escape. Then in Lord of the Ring, Frodo passes it on to Bilbo, and he gathers together Samwise, Merry, and Pippin. They start the journey, they make their way to the elves, and then they find some other members and become the Fellowship of the Ring, and that was the end of the first book / movie, and they carry on from there. So in the original Lord of the Rings, in the Silmarillion, Sauron is the guy who directs the rings creation because he intends to use them for influence because he has that one control ring, which the whole plot of the whole Lord of the Rings, at least where Sauron was involved with that age of the Earth, of the I don't know, the Hobbit realm. So in the original Lord of the Rings, in the Silmarillion, Sauron's the guy who directs the rings creation. So he's the main guy. The focus is on him as the evil character, and then the good characters would be I don't know. Gandalf the White, I guess, would be the opposition of one guy dressed all in black and one guy dressed all in white. But in the Rings of Power, Galadriel crafts the 3 rings because she was going to use their power to battle Sauron, which is a fine plot, actually, if that was what Tolkien wrote, but he didn't write that. So why are you essentially, Amazon, saying, oh, we're going to take the best fantasy writer on Earth and we think we can improve that? That doesn't make sense. He doesn't make sense because you didn't create Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and the Silmarillion. He did. And the other stories, he wrote a bunch of other stuff beyond that, but like he created these books that are world famous, and you, Amazon, didn't create these books. So essentially you're saying that you know better than him. So does Sauron still create the other rings for the dwarves and men? 9 for men, 7 for dwarves, 3 for elves, plus his own control ring. So the whole plot point of the Elven Rings is changed, and because of that, they had to go and change the story for how the men and the dwarves eventually get their rings, because they had to make Galadriel a Mary Sue purse puppy, which isn't, and hearing the Mary Sue magazine try to defend this kind of stuff is freaking bizarre, because they will defend anything as long as it's pox walks, as long as it has some kind of cultural Bolshevism in it, they will find a way to bend over backwards. Anyway, but changing that plot point actually could work. They could make their own rings, and then you just have Sauron use trickery to craft the ruling ring. But the thing is, it changes the character of Sauron. He's in the books, he's clever and he's deceitful. He has the rings made. He charms them. He cajoles the victims into taking them. It's an important part of his character development because it shows that he's multifaceted. He's not just a simple brute character like a cave troll that just charges straight ahead. He's not just pure evil. He's got a lot of nuance to him. He can be a soldier, a spy, a magician, a diplomat. You can compare him to Voldemort from Harry Potter, which is a much simpler character, much simpler books. To be fair, probably because the original story was written, Tolkien was writing for smart English kids. But 70 years later, Rowling had to dumb it down so much because the IQ has dropped so far. So Voldemort was just a bad guy, or at least not as complicated as Sauron. Plus, Rowling's a female, so she's not really capable of creating complicated characters. And she's a TERF, which I think also includes everyone on Earth, so that's not unique. I'm sure Tolkien also believes that women are not men. I think he mentioned that in Rings of Power, or the or Return of the King, where women are not men. I'm not a man. I mean, how would that work if men can be women now? I mean, not obviously it's all nonsense. So Rings of Power has already taken a lot of money, $700+ million, and it didn't get the attention it needed to, which is a nice way of saying the first season bombed because it was horrible, horrible. I suspect because they included characters that were not in the book, a bunch of Afro elves and Afro hobbits and some mixed race village, and it's some African queen is running this village, and it's everyone from around the world. And it's like, did none of this make sense? Even left wing audiences are looking at this and like, can we ask questions, or should we just put on our Hugo Boss if we ask questions? So the original stories were inspired by Tolkien's life in an old English village, but this version has a cast that looks like they threw a net outside of Hollywood and they just got the dregs and the scraps of whoever was on the street shooting heroin. How is there a mixed group of Euro and Afro hobbits? And who wants to see that? If I'm just being honest here, if more people were honest about this kind of stuff, you wouldn't get here. Like, as soon as you saw the Afro hobbits, you just started laughing and go like, this is ridiculous. So what you're saying is you Nazi Chad Hugo Boss. But if everyone just laughed at it and said, we want to see this story as Tolkien created it. We want you to honor the artist's original vision. And they are transformative, not curative. Nobody wants to see diversity. People hate diversity because, I mean, in real life and in stories, people hate the other tribes. And you would think Hollywood would have understood that by now. But left-wingers and reviewers, when they review this stuff, say they love it, but then they don't go and watch the shows. So the truth is, even the left wing hates diversity, and yet they keep pushing it for some wacky reason. Like Frankfurt School, Saul Alinsky, cultural Bolshevik reason, which is funny if you look up cultural Marxism on the Wikipedia. They give you this piece of damage control propaganda, and you go, but you didn't actually give me the history of cultural Bolshevism. You just gave me some bit of nonsense where you deflect and strawman and ad hominem. You didn't actually go into the history of it in the Frankfurt School. It's like, would you like to go into the history of that? And then Wikipedia is, no, dear Lord, we're not going to do that. Anyway, so no, there were no Afro hobbits. We want curative stories. We won't want transformative stories. The reason Tolkien is a worldwide name, is translated in all these different languages, and the movies were such a hit, is because people like the original stories. From around the world, people like the original stories because they could see themselves in the stories. Tolkien created these stories. Amazon didn't create anything. They are a packaging company, an AI company, a lot of very intelligent engineers and chemists and physicists. Yes, that's a lot of creative computer engineers, guys, mathematicians for sure, but they're not writers and creators of stories like Tolkien was. Tolkien's not creating Amazon, but Amazon could not create Tolkien, not on their best day. Amazon's a bunch of parasites. The best they could have hoped for would be to maintain Tolkien's original artistic vision. Why didn't you race swap Sauron? But they hate Tolkien simply because he's English, of course, and white, and better than them. He is better than them. He can create a story. SJWs can't create anything. And I don't just mean with Tolkien. They never create anything new. If you look around at the stuff they do try to come up with, it feels really ephemeral. It feels like clouds. It's the found family, the Bolshevik found family concept, but they have no roots, they have no structure, so they come together and then they just, as soon as there's a puff of wind, they just disappear. And it's pretty interesting because everything they do is to push this left-wing nonsense agenda, that, anti-Christian, anti-white, anti-nation. It's just all globalist cancer. So they can't create these fresh, organic stories because stories are based in old tribal concepts. Stories are fundamentally nationalist. So for these SJWs to tell stories, it has to be a diverse group of mostly black girls, lesbians, which is what diversity means to them. It mostly means black lesbians. What was that? Not the Pirates of the Caribbean show that just came out. The other show, Peter Pan? Yeah, Peter Pan came out. Yeah, so it's the Lost Boys. It's the Lost Boys. I can't help but notice the Lost Boys look like little African girls and some Indian boys. And it's an English story, but you've got African and Indians. And it's the Lost Boys because girls are too smart to fall out of their baby carriage or something, their tram. Yeah. I mean, that's just developmentally disabled, but the R slur for developmentally disabled. And work in bundles of sticks. I mean, everything is just so fake and gay. It hurts. It hurts how stupid this stuff is. And in 10 years, 20 years, people are going to look back from this and go, whoa, what a weird period of time. Yeah. Anyways, if you're not dodging plutonium fallout. So stories are nationalist. They're not globalist. Globalist stories are propaganda. It kind of reminds me of God, what was that? God, what was that movie? That comic book? Okay, I think the comic book was called Elf Quest, where it wasn't an organic story. It was a bit of propaganda, but it was loosely based on organic fantasy, European fantasy stories. But then they put in some propaganda where the fair skinned elves meet the dark skinned elves, and they give this little speech about, hey, we're all the same under the skin. Like, you're writing propaganda. This is nothing but propaganda. Why are you writing this? Because it's a 30-year-old woman who's has a lot of crystals and believes in all this kind of nonsense. And to be fair, ElfQuest was a pretty decent success, I think, at the time. But it's like it was propaganda. It was just nothing. It's anyway. So there's these modern stories, these diverse stories, where you got a bunch of different people in them. It's got a group of all these purse puppies, and it begs the question: why are they all together? Who are they? How are they a tribe? Because tribes of people all look roughly the same. They are one people. You can't tell a classic story that will stand the test of time and simultaneously make propaganda where half the characters are black, Asian, Indian, Middle Eastern, Pacific Islander, and all this kind of stuff. Because they don't belong together. It's obviously propaganda. Hollywood doesn't even try to hide it now. It's ever since 2016 and 2020, it's kind of been masked off. The only reason they buy the rights to these stories is for name recognition and bait and switch. Because if they wrote one of their stories organically, it would have no roots, no connection to it. So what they'd have to do is that you go, so write a story series and have it catch on. Like write your own Rings of Power, or Lord of the Rings. Write your own Xanth series. Write your own, whatever series that you think you can put together and will catch on. Wheel of Time type of books. Like write your own books. Wait 10 and 20 years for the story to catch on organically. And then they say, well, we don't want to wait that long. But the other truth of the matter is, like, they can't write their own stories and have it catch on organically because it won't catch on organically. Because Lord of the Rings made sense because it was one tribe fighting for their well, I guess it was a bunch of different species, but they all kind of had the same worldview. They all kind of had the same values. Like they were on the side of the light, the side of the goodness and purity, and they're fighting evil. But the analogy to make Earth isn't like that, because there are these groups, and each group considers the other group on the side of evil. So it's like it doesn't work when you start mixing it up. But when you tell the SCWs to write their own things, develop it organically, they know they're not going to write even a Wheel of Time is just a silly little fantasy story, which was hugely popular, or Game of Thrones. They can't write something because they go, okay, we're going to write this story, but it's all going to be a mixed group of people, mostly African lesbians, but it's going to be set in an old English setting with like dragons and knights in horseback on with the shining armor type of stuff. It's like, well, that's not African mythology. It doesn't make sense right from the start, and the story doesn't catch on. So they know that. So SJWs, globalists, Marxists, whatever you want to call them, they really cannot create anything new because everything to them is nothing but globalist propaganda. Anyway, when they hear this, they go, "Yikes, my guy! Touch grass, touch whatever." But it's like angering people doesn't get you to sell the show. You can fight with people. James Gunn can argue with people all he wants online, but it's like it doesn't get people into it doesn't get butts in seats. And I think Rings of Power is pretty much doomed anyway. The next season comes out in 2 years because of the Wu flu for some reason. It's weird to me that people took the Wu flu so seriously. I gotta admit, I did not take that very seriously at all. I think I washed my hands the first 3 months, and that was all I did. And then I kind of forgot about it. Now I'm back to picking my nose. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. See you guys all next episode.